It's been weeks since The Force Awakens premiered, but are you still in that Star Wars mood? Are you looking for something to satiate that yearning, but you've already watched all the official Star Wars movies and you need more? Then let's talk about The Men Who Stare at Goats. This movie stars Ewan McGregor, George Clooney, Jeff Bridges, Kevin Spacey, and a goat. Ewan is a journalist. When his wife leaves him, he goes to Iraq, where he meets former psychic soldier George Clooney. Clooney takes him on an adventure where he teaches him about his powers, and he provides extensive back flashes and flashbacks. And that's the plot of the movie. Yes, this movie doesn't have much of a story, but it does have fantastic characters in it. And unlike other movies that have great fun characters but no sign of original unique story, I am okay with it here. Ardith Bay once said, "Only the journey is written, not the destination." And in this case, that means that just because there's not a big complicated plot doesn't mean that this movie is bad. Since this film doesn't have to worry about hitting all of these plot points, it is allowed to breathe a little bit and let us get to know these characters. And what characters! Just about everyone in this movie feels real, even though the setting is far-fetched. Even our bad guy, Kevin Spacey, isn't a one-dimensional Sith Lord. In the backflashes, he's portrayed as selfish and power-hungry, which makes him very unsympathetic, but he still seems real. There's lots of selfish, power-hungry people out there, so this guy doesn't seem like he's an element of fancy. But then in that last leg of the film, we see that even selfish, power-hungry people aren't all bad. He's working for peaceful solutions for war, just like two of our principal players in this film. This is a beautiful portrayal of a running theme of this movie, and that is truth. Yes, it's still out there. This movie, and the book of which it is based on, if author John Ronson is to be believed, is about how truth is subjective. You might be surprised to hear that this movie is based on real events. There actually was an American military unit in the 80s that experimented with, shall we say, out-of-the-box methods of ending wars. This isn't to say that there really are people who can kill a goat just by staring hard at it. That's for each of you, and for Ewan McGregor, to decide for yourselves. But if the very real characters going through very surreal adventures isn't enough to hook you, then you might be more interested in this piece of cinema when you find out it's based in reality. There's a neat featurette in the DVD for this movie that somewhat explores the history behind this story. And since the whole story is told through the lens of a journalist interviewing people and getting different pieces of the whole story from each of them, it never feels too incredible. And if you are a skeptic, you can always write it off as, "Those guys are crazy," even if I can't deny the existence of a military unit called the 1st Earth Battalion. This whole idea of truth being subjective isn't just limited to the movie and the events the movie is based on either. It can really help you change your own life for the better. I used to work with selfish, power-hungry people. Their greed and villainy never got them very far, but even now I sometimes hold on to the bitterness that grew from having to work with that fiend. But watching this movie, it really is a fun, enjoyable way of saying not everything is black and white. That scoundrel I worked with, I might see as Kevin Bacon from the George Clooney interviews with Ewan, but in reality, there may be more bubbling under the surface. It's something to think about if you let it warp your mind a little. So what does this have to do with Star Wars? Well, the obvious bit is that Ewan McGregor, one-time Obi-Wan Kenobi, is the protagonist of this movie. But also, this story is just a darn good Star Wars story. Imagine, for a minute, that the Star Wars prequels are garbage. That's not too hard to imagine because they are. In the old Star Wars movies, Obi-Wan Kenobi talks about his old buddy he had adventures with and how he palled around with these hippie warriors who are all extinct. Hey, that sounds like this movie. Heck, the unit of allegedly telepathic soldiers was called Project Jedi, we're told, because President Reagan was a fan of the Star Wars movies and he liked the paranormal in general. George Clooney repeatedly calls himself a Jedi warrior. He has a little plastic thing that can hurt you in 100 different ways, but looks pretty unassuming. Kinda like a lightsaber if you had never seen one before. If you like the idea of Obi-Wan Kenobi being a young, reckless adventurer with a wizened mentor figure who dies after passing on his lessons to his young apprentice, well, that happens here. And only a little offense meant to The Phantom Menace, but it's done a lot better here. While Ewan and Liam Neeson are great actors, and they gave it their best shot in the actual Star Wars prequels, I never believed in their relationship in that movie. But in this movie, just like the characters, the interactions feel authentic. Ewan gets aggravated at Clooney because he's possibly psychotic. But then when they get to the Sybase in the present day, Ewan feeling sorry for this man who he has been through some stuff with also also feels authentic. Ewan arriving at that point where he believes doesn't feel too forced. Sure, I wish they had left that deleted scene of Ewan dispersed in the cloud in the movie, as it would transition better from Jeff Bridges saying none of it was real, sorry Han Solo, and Jeff and Ewan training. Although we don't actually get to see George die in this movie, he talks about his impending death, and it feels about as tragic, probably more so, than Qui-Gon getting gutted in The Phantom Menace. We're just seeing some dudes talking about cancer, and it has more gravitas than the stabby-stabby of The Phantom Menace. For that matter, this movie also handles the fall of the Jedi Knights much better than the Revenge of the Sith did. Lots of people have mixed feelings on the idea of Anakin killing a bunch of kids. On the one hand, it shows just how far he's fallen. On the other hand, how much skill does it really take to kill a bunch of toddlers? And then there's the whole thing about how the clones really killed most of the Jedi, even though Obi-Wan told Luke that Vader hunted down the Jedi himself. Well, the idea that a group of hippie warriors are betrayed from within is a good idea. George Lucas knew it in the 1970s, and it happens in this story as well. Maybe it also happened in real life, or maybe this is one of those embellishments that John Ronson added for dramatic flair. But how Kevin Spacey leads to the fiasco at the base where the Earth Battalion train, and then testifies against Jeff Bridges, it feels much more real than anything that happened in The Revenge of the Sith, because the character motivations are consistent throughout this movie. Maybe Anakin says he's joining the Emperor to save his wife, but then when she dies, why does he keep working with the Emperor? Why not just fall on his sword, since all he had to live for is gone? See, the character motivation is all wonky. But here, Kevin Spacey is played as selfish and power-hungry all through the back flashes, so his ultimate death blow to the Earth Battalion feels authentic, and like the movie actually earned it. And it's all the more tragic because, unlike Anakin in the end of Revenge of the Sith, where I don't really understand this guy anymore, with Kevin Spacey, like I said, he's still working for the same thing the Earth Battalion was in the back flashes. So the next time you want to marathon the Star Wars movies, and maybe you feel reluctant to put on the prequels, I would suggest you watch this prequel instead. No, it doesn't line up with most of the backstory given in the old Star Wars movies, or really any of the backstory, but it is a superior film to any and all of the Star Wars prequels, and I think you'll enjoy yourself much more if you watch this movie instead of the prequels. But those are just my thoughts. What do you guys think of the movie and of this video? If you liked it, of course you should like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I do other videos on this channel, which you should check out if you did like this video. In the meantime, may my boots always kiss your face, and may my footsteps always match your heartbeat.